This is how I went from painting stiff, cartoony faces to portraits that actually feel real. If you've ever looked at your painting and thought, something feels off, I've definitely been there. After a lot of trial and error and way too many YouTube tutorials, I found a process that actually worked. And I even tested it on 3 of my old paintings just to make sure it wasn't a fluke. So in this video, I'll walk you through my full 4-step process, from sketching and setting a strong foundation, to mapping out values, to blocking in the base skin tones, and finally, refining with subtle color variation. I'm working in Procreate, but this method should work for oils, acrylics, or pencil. After all, I did learn these steps from artists working in traditional media. So let's get into it. A good painting starts with a good foundation, and that begins with the sketch. Think of it like scaffolding. Even if it's loose and messy, your sketch determines the proportions, composition, and overall balance of the painting. When I spend time on the sketch, the whole painting flows more smoothly. I'm not second-guessing things halfway through, and I'm confident about the story I'm telling. So before I paint anything, I start with a very loose sketch. I'm not going for detail yet, and I'm thinking, are the features roughly in place? Is the composition balanced? Are the proportions believable? I'll keep things light and flexible and erase freely and flip the canvas often. It'll also help me spot any symmetry issues and weird angles before I've invested too much time in painting. And as I mentioned, the sketch is just the scaffolding. We will build on top of this with color. This may seem trivial, but having to rework anything once the layers are put down or once the paint is put down is going to be such a huge headache. So it's important we get this right early on. If your paintings look flat, maybe it is time to reassess your values. Understanding values is arguably, I think, the most important thing in a painting because it's what makes your paintings read. At first, I thought I just needed better skin tones. I figured as long as I picked a good mid-tone from the reference picture, I could adjust going darker and lighter from there. But a while back, I started a portrait with a mid-tone, and it looked close enough to the shadows in my reference, but I ignored the fact that the reference face was very well lit and closer to the lighter lights than the mid-tone. But needless to say, my values were completely off, and no matter how much I layered highlights and added contrasts later, the painting just looked really muddy, very flat, and almost unreadable. And that's where the very common artist quote hit me. Value does all the work, color gets all the credit. And I realized I've been focused on the wrong thing. So I scrapped it and tried again. But this time, I started by mapping out the values before adding any color. And the difference was night and day. So here's how I do it now. Start by defining your light source. Ask yourself, what's the story my light is telling? Is it soft and diffuse, sharp or dramatic? And then break the reference into 3 main value zones: darkest dark, mid-tones, and lightest lights. And squinting helps. It blurs the noise and makes value shifts more obvious. For example, in this portrait, her hair is the darkest dark. The shadow on her cheek is the mid-tones. And the sunlight hitting her forehead and cheek is the highlight. So you might be thinking, isn't this too simple? What about the subtle shadows that fall between the lightest lights and the darkest darks? Well, you're right, it is a simplification. But that's the point. We simplify early so we don't get lost in the details and still capture the light story. Getting 20% of the values right can give you 80% of the clarity, but 100% of the core structure, which is the most important when you're early in the process. This sets the structure. If your values are wrong, no amount of color correction will save it. But with a correct understanding of values, even if you get the hues wrong, it'll still read correctly. Now that we understand our values, we can start adding our colors. And no, you don't need to figure out all the 50 different skin shades. I start every portrait with just 3 colors. And this step is about adding local color, the base skin tone, before we make the refinements. And it's very important we start simple so we don't get lost in all the subtle tones yet. First, we need to squint at your reference to blur the details. I picked the 3 base colors. Darkest dark is black for her hair, a rosy brown for her shadow, and the highlights a warm light yellow. And that's it. There's no blush, no eye colors, no fancy ambient light yet. I keep it simple here to make sure that the colors match the values I mapped and the base hues are close enough to the real thing. And this will make a huge difference later. If your base is too different from the reference picture, every detail you add will look off. Getting the base close enough helps everything else fall into place, and you'll see this in action when we start refining the painting in the next step. This is the step that completely changed the way all my portraits looked. Color variation. It's what took my work from, hey, that's cute, to, wait, that actually looks real. And once I learned how to create color variation, everything clicked. So why does this work? Skin isn't just one tone. It has subtle hue shifts from skin pigmentation, blood vessels, and it even gets colors from light and shadow casted from the surrounding objects. So here's how I do it. I pick a section, like the cheek, I eyedrop a color in that section, and then I adjust the hues slightly, like pushing it warmer or cooler, without changing the value. So if the cheek is a little pinker than the rest of the face, I shift the hue towards red and maybe add a bit more saturation. And same with the shadows. This one area on her nose bridge looks warmer than the rest of the shadow, so I pushed up the saturation. And the key here is to not mess with the value. Just shift the hue or saturation slightly, and this builds depth without ruining the structure, which is why step 2 and 3 was so crucial. Getting the values and hues of the base right was key to getting the color variations right because they build up on top of the base. You don't even have to get the base to match to a T. It's literally impossible to eyeball the specific hex code of the reference color. As long as you get it close enough, you can still adjust it. I did it here because I made the base a little too yellow, so the highlights and shadows followed those yellow hues. And I'm fixing that by pushing it a little to the red to reflect her pink undertones. Afterwards, I looked for other subtle changes across the face and repeated the eyedrop steps until I was happy with how it looks. And that's it, friends. That concludes the tutorial. If you're frustrated or overwhelmed, I promise you are not alone. There are so many tutorials and hacks out there, and not all of them will work for you, and that is completely okay. What worked for me might not even work for you. But the goal is to keep experimenting until something clicks. And there's really no single right formula, just tools that'll help you get closer to what you want to paint. If you're already in the middle of your painting journey, you won't be starting from scratch. If you're used to painting landscapes, the process is actually pretty similar. We'll still map and simplify the values, block local colors in, and then make some refinements. But this video is about painting realistic looking faces, so the refinement stage will definitely take a little more time. And if you're already painting faces but they still feel flat, try these two things. Spend more time planning values up front, and add more subtle color variation during the refinement stage. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. If this helped you at all, I'd love to hear what worked, and if you're still figuring things out, leave a comment and we can talk through it. I'm not a professional painter, nor did I go to art school. I just paint in my free time, and I make these videos to share tips that help me make art that I'm proud of. So feel free to subscribe if you'd like to tune into more of these videos, and until next time, happy painting!